Right, I suppose I'll start then. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Laws. I am a program controls, project controls person. I work for the company called CH2M, and thank you very much for making what is apparently an enormously long foot trek over from the front door, and thank you for staying on after what is the traditional time for going home, which is the afternoon coffee break. So I'm here to talk about the controls professionals make or buy. This isn't my idea. I was seconded in by Mr. Simon Springate, who's given this presentation in previous periods. So those of you who are expecting to see him, I apologise. So briefly about me then. I was, until last Friday, Head of Reporting and Head of Programme Efficiency at Crossrail. And I'm now supporting a wide portfolio of interesting projects for CH2M, i.e. I'm looking for a fee-paying role. It's done it again. However, I look to start with the Lower Thames Crossing, which you might have heard stuff about earlier today, in about a week or so. So I describe myself as a professional bureaucrat. I've always worked in big, complex organisations, like the Ministry of Defence and Crossrail, big, complex organisation. I'm a chartered accountant, but I have an interest in how people and organisations communicate and learn, which made me a surprisingly good fit for the random job I was assigned to when I joined CH2M, which was Head of Reporting for Crossrail. So the two things we're going to talk about is how do we attract, recruit and retain great people. I suppose that's either in your own company, in the project you're working in, or indeed, at the sort of the industry level. It's done it again, this is annoying. What are the core skills or competencies which these people need? But first, regrettably, a brief period about CH2M. So there we go. We are a global full-service consulting design and design build operations and program management company. Apologies for the spelling of program. We're an American company. We have to allow them some stuff. So we work for Crossrail. We work for High Speed 2. Team 2100, which is an asset management program of the Thames, Lower Thames Crossing, which I've mentioned earlier, Panama Canal expansion, so lots of big complex programs. So that's the end of that. My question, I suppose, to the room, and we look at ourselves internally, is how do we maintain a staff which is sufficient, capable and motivated? This keeps jumping on, which is annoying me. So the sufficient means we have enough people capable, they have the appropriate skills and experience to do the work that we need of them, and they are motivated, i.e. they have the will to succeed in what is often complex, challenging, emotionally draining endeavours. So complexity is essentially where we are most likely to be found. So we do this in a number of ways. We look to generate a variety of work for people, which may include some small projects, some consulting work, some longer stints on the big blue ribbon programs. And we also look to make sure that a bit of training and that sort of thing and motivated a balance of this sort of pay, remuneration, allowances, and access to great work. So the way we look at this for program and project controls is a sort of breadth and depth type of arrangement, where we have at the top leadership, communication, management, and then the individual, the depth, skills, it's done it again, of cost, risk, schedule, change, contract administration. And as you can see, at the bottom you've got tactical level stuff. I can make my spreadsheet work. Operational, I can then communicate to people about what my spreadsheet means. And strategic, I can then plan to ensure that that work or that information helps inform my business, helps inform my program, and in the end comes along and generates a successful outcome. And what the next slide I think is very much is tied into what the last speaker was talking about, is there's two halves to our program world. We've got let's see if I can just stop this moving. Bear with me. didn't work. Now, stop. There we are. You've got the corporate brain, the executive, the thing which is controlling the program, and we have the project, the site environment, which is the people doing the work. And then you've got some feedback, which is your program controls, the information feedback. And then you've got your governance on this side, which is basically controlling, directing what the people on the site are doing. So this might be the interface, this describes the interface essentially between the executive and the projects, or indeed between the sponsors and the executive. And there are faults to this, and the bullets underneath demonstrate some of this. So the real world is, and this isn't my work, this is a guy called John Sterman who works at MIT as a professor in system dynamics. So none of this is original thought particularly, but I'm just using it as an application to our particular environment. So our project, it's got dynamic complexity, which means there's lots going on, there's lots of personalities, there's lots of different stuff which is affecting how people are able to do the things they've been asked to do. So there's delayed feedback, which means in between you telling them to do something and them doing it, and then there being an impact of that thing happening, might take a number of days or weeks, and depending on the size of your program or the complexity of what's going on, and indeed the nature of the particular change, that will vary considerably. And because it's the real world and you're involved in delivering your project and not necessarily doing some sort of scientific-based analysis, there's difficulty in conducting controlled experiments. So you're not really sure, you pull the lever, and you're not really sure if it would have happened anyway, or you've helped, or you've hindered, or indeed nothing really, it's one of the levers which isn't attached to anything. So you feel like you're dry. It's like my son, when he was very tidy, he was in the back of the car, and we went to Argos and we bought one of those plastic steering wheels. And he thought he was driving the car, and clearly he wasn't. Whereas to him, he thought he was in control. So beware the inference or the appearance of control where in fact none exists. So if you go over here on the right-hand side, you're right. So information feedback, this is about our control systems. And we've been talking today, I'm sure lots of people I've been listening to have been talking about how it's been consistent and it's accurate, and there's lots of detail and everyone understands what's going on. It's a consistent picture, and to a certain extent I think that's true. But of course you're only reporting on some stuff because you've chosen to measure, the amount of concrete you've poured, or the amount of rebar you've fixed, or whatever the other quantity is, but there's lots of things you've decided not to measure, and as long as you've done that deliberately and you've recognised the implications of doing that, then that's fine. But there's some stuff which you're not reporting on, the missing feedback, because you've chosen not to, or indeed because you haven't realised it's important. Then of course there's delay, because in Crossrail, for example, where I am working till recently, the executive got some feedback weekly, some feedback monthly, and even in the most telling areas, we only got feedback on a sort of 24-hour basis, whereas clearly lots of work's gone on, and lots of other stuff has happened in that time. And then bias and ambiguity. So I'm measuring, I'm assessing work on the basis of my own expectation. The view from where I am is unique to me because I'm the only one here. And ambiguity in as much as that people aren't sufficiently clear in how they either describe the work that they're doing or the work that's been done. And there is inevitably sort of a communication, a translation issue between the man who says, I've done this, it passes on through a computer system to say, I've done that, and it goes into the controls department and they have a look at that and they scratch their chins a little bit and they think, goodness me, this may or may not be the truth, let's go and investigate. And there's a sort of, there's feedback in that area also. And then it goes into the mental model of the corporate brain, the executive, the people doing the work, the people managing the work. And then down on the other side, you've got your strategy and your structure and decision rules, the excellent presentation which Walter McCarg gave earlier today on Crossrail's change process. That's an example of the strategy, the decision rules, how you effect change, and the decision-making process. And then the direction which you've generated goes back into the project, and then they get on and do whatever different thing you've asked them to do differently, whether that be a different specification, a different time, a different colour. So, can anyone see any similarities in this? Do you recognise this as a model of real life, or is it something I pulled out of the wrong textbook? Has anyone got a view? And do you want to elaborate, or?
No, I think this is happening
Sorry, can we just get that question repeated?
I believe it's so true. Yeah, we can see it in every day in our workplace. Yeah, those information feedback when it's being selective or missing.
Yeah, it's because programs are a human endeavour being delivered by people, and what you've got here is an imperfect system because it's being done by humans, and humans are imperfect, and they suffer from bias because they only see what they can see because they're the only people in that particular place. And you get the feeling that whilst you've got a process for generating the information, you're almost battling to make sure that you're getting a representative picture. Reporting is about painting a picture of progress. It's about generating a model of reality, and models are simplifications. Therefore, you need to be sure that the simplifications are done in the right way, and you understand that you are simplifying things to make it easier to understand rather than making it less clear. And inevitably, when you generate a model, you lose clarity and granularity, so you're swapping detail for general. So what I was going to come on to then is some stories about communication in this context. And one which is in the papers recently, forgive me, I'll refer to my notes. Has anyone seen in the news this business about High Speed 2 and its pension plan? That's wrong, the redundancy payments. Bridget, would you like to elaborate?
Yes, I've seen it. I didn't go into all the detail, but basically they think they're paying way too much for the redundancy when they told them they shouldn't be paying redundancy, and they are. Exactly.
So the High Speed 2 Limited's accounts were audited by the Comptometer and Auditor General, the National Audit Office, and what they discovered was that the redundancy payments which were being paid out were not compliant with the wider governmental rules on the civil service. And what it meant was that the High Speed 2 redundees, the people who made redundant when the offices were moved from London to Birmingham, were paid approximately £1.4 million more than they should have been. And what's happened is that the NAO, what happens is you have the Public Accounts Committee, which is a committee of MPs. If you look it up on Parliament TV, there's a great little piece of Mark Thurston, who used to be my boss, who's now Chief Exec of High Speed 2, being made to feel very uncomfortable by the MPs, demonstrating the error of his, i.e. High Speed 2's ways in the poor management of public money. And this is essentially a breakdown in the model that we have here. So up here you have the High Speed 2 engine, and bear in mind Mark Thurston was not involved because he wasn't in the High Speed 2 at the time, but we'll come to that. So up there at the top is High Speed 2 Limited. Down there, the corporate brain, the thing giving the instruction, was the Department of Transport. Does anyone know who the permanent Undersecretary is for the Department of Transport? Now, I didn't either until I checked. It was Bernadette Kelly is the lady who's in charge now, and previously is a guy called Phil Rutnam. And previous head of chief exec of High Speed 2, anyone? Simon Kirby, he went off to be in charge of Rolls-Royce, another very large, almost public sector company. So what happened was, up at the top, High Speed 2 said, we'd like to issue some redundancies. And High Speed 2 is governed by this book, which is basically says, these are the things you can do, these are the things you can't do, these are the sort of special dispensations you get for being High Speed 2 as opposed to another analogous non-departmental public body. You've still got to manage public money in an effective way, but you're allowed to pay a little bit more because you're doing clever stuff, and but you still can't pay twice as much redundancy as you as you should do. So they said, we want to pay redundancy on a particular message. And what happened was the corporate brain said, and it sort of went back in this on the left-hand loop there, or the right-hand loop as you are, and it went to the corporate brain said, no. So the corporate brain sent an email back to Simon Kirby, and what happened was they sent this email back, and Simon Kirby says, I don't remember getting that email. So they carried on paying these redundancy payments out to the people who are being made redundant. And it's come back, and we've demonstrated the fact that, in actual fact, because there was insufficiently clear communication, wasted a big lump of public money, which is obviously enormously frustrating, and it's enormously damaging to High Speed 2, because their reputation as an organisation which is capable and effective has been eroded by this incident. And bearing in mind, reporting is supposed to generate assurance and confidence. This is indeed a negative thing. So on a slightly more banal, I'll give you another example, which is close to my heart. So I ordered the other evening a curry from the takeaway, and my mum and dad had come over, and my wife. And my wife said to my wife, "What would you like?" And she said, "I would like, please, a chicken bhuna." So I said, "Okay, chicken bhuna." So I wrote it down, chicken bhuna. And I rang up the takeaway, and I ordered, wrote down everyone else's and got it right, and then I got to chicken bhuna, and I said, I would like a tandoori mixed grill, please. And the tandoori mixed grill, and my wife said, did you just order me a tandoori mixed grill? I said, no, I ordered you chicken bhuna. And obviously the tandoori mixed grill turned up, and there wasn't any other food which she wanted to eat. And there was this huge and rather sort of embarrassing silence from my parents who were saying, Michael, how could you, essentially? And my wife looked at me in stony silence, how appalled she was. Essentially, had I just misspoke at the critical time, or had I indeed just chosen to order her a tandoori mixed grill because I thought she deserved it. But again, it's about having an understanding of the links between the project and the people doing the work, i.e. me and my wife, the corporate brain, and having a conversation which I understood what she wanted because I read it back to her. Yes, chicken bhuna. But of course what came out was something completely different because I had, in my very simple mind, I had unscrambled the message, sent the wrong thing, but in my mind, I was absolutely convinced that I'd ordered the right thing. Now, I've given two examples there. Has anyone else got some good examples, some stories about communication which they'd like to share in a similar way, perhaps on a project basis or perhaps in another context? I'm looking longingly at my colleagues from BAE. No? Very well. I'll make up some more as we go along. I think what I'm trying to get to is a position whereby we've got lots of people, and if we go back a slide, can I do that? Doing cost management and risk management, schedule management, change management. They're all generating information, and they are all making analyses, and they are all making recommendations. But there's an air gap, and I've deliberately put an air gap on this slide, between the people generating all this deep data, and then your leadership communication and management therein. So you want people to be doing the right work, but if you generate something which cannot be understood, or people are unwilling to listen to, or you do not put into people's hands in the right way, i.e. you need to, there's almost a handling plan you need to attach to information, you need to educate the user as to its importance. If you do not have those people who are capable of that, the red box at the top, the value in the information you are generating is lost, because you might have the right answer somewhere in the white boxes at the bottom. But if you can't find it, and then you can't transmit it, and then you can't convince someone that it's right, and then you can't advise them on the appropriate course of action to take, then you are wasting your time at the bottom. So I would argue perhaps that you might want to think very carefully about the things you're managing and measuring at the bottom, and perhaps do a little bit less of that. And then you spend a bit more time on communicating that so it's understandable, so your team is in agreement about what the message is, what the information means. And then your user group, your executive, the corporate brain, understands what it means, understands why it's important, and understands that it's time limited. And that it needs to be used to either inform a decision, or is used to inform someone else in order to generate assurance, we know what we're doing, or confidence, i.e. don't worry, I've told you about it, and we'll get on with doing the work. So I think, what time am I finishing, please? 15 minutes, goodness me. Well, as I've reached the end of my conclusion, I was hoping for a bit of chat. Does anyone got any views on the things I've said? Or indeed, now that you've had a bit of time to think about it, some stories about communication or miscommunication? Bridget? Oh, thank you.
Working for a communications company at one point in my career, we were putting in a network, and we were all under the impression that the last piece, your last mile, was all included in the spec for the project, whereas in fact the last piece, which actually got this signal up internationally, was missing. But all through the project, for the first 5 months, everyone believed that that was right. But what happened in the meantime was that the amount of network capacity available had actually been eaten up. So there was no network capacity available on that last bit, which was only realised in the last month. There was a lot of to-ing and fro-ing and blaming going on at one point then. But in the end, through some extra communication at that point, but a bit late in the day, the final mile was actually installed and the project did actually hit its deadline, but more by luck than judgment really. And it was due mainly to poor communication and assuming things that are happening when they're not. And so that vital piece of communication of where you actually talk to colleagues on and for certain parts of the project need to be defined and particularly in place when you're doing something like that.
I think that's a really good example. And the change management or scope management, and Khaled and others will know well about it. Do we all have a common understanding of what we're here to do, both at the macro level? I am moving London forward, as I was until last Friday, but at the more detailed level, yes, we have worked out what the scope is. We have chopped it up into appropriate levels of manageable chunks, and then we've given all of it to someone. And there are those gaps. Will the scope which I have defined meet the end user's requirement? And again, the levels of assumptions which you might generate. Yes, or yes, I just whatever I got given last time, I've been told to do this. But waste, of course, happens at the interface. and to what extent is there a 6 foot gap in your in your cable, or a big hole which you haven't filled? Because clearly, if you're generating an end-to-end thing, or indeed a watertight thing, it doesn't really matter if you're 90% there or 99% there, because you are you've still failed to meet the principal requirement. Anyone else, please? Yes, sir.
I think I've seen the same model but with a slightly different spin on it. So if you just go to the cycle again, the way I've always understood it is more in the context of, let's say, a monthly long bit of reporting, and that you've got the latency in getting the data to the right person at the right time such that they can make the right decision. And because we've got delays in decision making, delays in organisation, delays in systems, we get the wrong data to the wrong people. By the time the decision gets made up there, you're actually fixing the problem that was moved on from the one you started with, if you like. You might end up making things worse. Is that the same model?
I think this is a hierarchical model, in as much as you've got the corporate brain at the top, and then they're telling people at the bottom to do things. However, you're absolutely right that delay is involved in this model as a factor, and I think there's two things which run simultaneously. You've got your periodic reporting, which is progress, and it's standard, and it's all the same thing. And then you've got your decision analysis type reporting, which would feed your change process, which is time limited. So then you've got, in order, at a particular board, there's a backlink to your governance structure. For I need to have a decision made by a particular date. So, and it's of a particular magnitude. So therefore, it needs to go to this board or this committee or this person, depending on how massive the issue is. And then you have the sort of working back principle. Is how long have I got in order to generate an argument which then satisfies the governance and convinces people that I understand what the problem is, I have analysed the potential courses of action, and I have recommended one based on the available evidence. Yeah. And that sounds quite formulaic. It also sounds quite idealistic, because clearly sometimes you've got 4 hours to make a decision, or even less perhaps if you're in some sort of railway possession type issue. I must decide what to do now in order to save the possession. But then you'd have done your contingency planning earlier, and then you would have had in event of this, pull this handle, and and then we'll do this instead. As you've already generated your courses of action. I think your point is well made about the latency of the information, i.e., how volatile is it? When does it? How quickly does it go off? Is it long life information which you can then take longer to make your decision over, or is it just standard stuff that generates out of the periodic reporting process, or is it very, very important stuff that happens that is of short order? And I think making that differentiation early is important. Thank you. Yes.
What is the relation with this slide and the title of your presentation?
That's a brilliant point. So on the basis that Mr. Simon Springate was down to speak, he chose what he wanted me to speak of. Now I would say that this is essentially a model which you need people to understand in order to be effective at working in your program controls area. You need people who are intellectually flexible. So I think you can apply this as a way of understanding the types of skills which you might require, whether or not that leads you to a decision about recruiting them long term, or pulling them in off the street or having some sort of development plan. I'm not sure. I mean, perhaps have you got a view?
I need to think about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Make?
Why not? So the answer to the question at the beginning is it all depends. It all depends on your attitude, whether you're expecting to require people long term or short term. But my conclusion, I suppose, would be that you need flexible individuals. You will need to provide them interesting work because there's low barriers to switching in this industry, i.e. it doesn't take much to move from company A to company B. And it is all the quality, all the value in your companies are vested in the people because it's a human endeavour. It's all people with their skills, managing the systems and the other things which generate project intelligence. And without those people, the value in the company founders. So any more, please, or not? Yes, sir. Hold on, you need the mic.
To be honest, I don't think what you presented really relates to the topic.
Yeah, probably right.
And I feel sorry for you because it looks like you've been shafted, really. So, it's been an interesting presentation, but clearly the guy who put it together should be the one presenting it and not you. But well done anyway.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Mike, I would second that observation. A quick, sort of perhaps more personal question for you. You're coming off a massive project, massive tunnelling project, and apparently you're moving on to what is an enormous single tunnelling type project. So, under the context of communication, you've seen the Crossrail project right into and towards the end of its construction, and the project you're going on to, based on the presentations this morning, in theory won't get into sort of detailed design and that to something like 2021. So if you're asked to communicate some lessons learned from the Crossrail project on both the positive and negative side, things to avoid, things to definitely do, off the top of your head, what would you be saying to the LTC project once you roll on board?
And thank you for the question. I think the principal thing is about having a single unifying purpose. So the Crossrail's particularly good at recognising that we're all moving London forward, and to make sure that everyone feels that they're all terribly important parts of the organisation in generating that. So having that is very important. Having a collaborative working environment within the programme team, whether that be, so at Crossrail, it's a mixture of contractor staff and TfL staff, or Crossrail in indigenous people. And what that means is that everyone leaves their company identity at the door, and is striving to work together to deliver the outcomes required of Crossrail. Now, because it's such a complex endeavour, having those extra tensions within the joint venture or within the programme team is unreasonably burdening, and it's something you need to manage away. So that, in terms of cultural identity, I'm not an engineer or a designer, so in terms of those those technical issues, I can't make a comment. But in terms of the programme controls, I think having decent, sensible setup, having an appropriate amount of money spent on good systems and great people to run them is really important. and it is a factor of the positive working environment which generates, or the collaborative environment which generates a place where you can communicate freely and you can transmit the appropriate amount of information, so people aren't concerned about the repercussions for reporting bad news. So there's quite a lot in the cultural space which supports effective communication. Right, thanks very much.